This is a little one-shot video on the paper by danah and Kate Crawford. They have a social science and media studies background, and they analyze big data based on this background. Critical questions for big data is the title. So what they want is to talk about big data and start a discussion in the public. So they have 6 provocations that might make people understand that are not coming from the social science and media studies background to understand their concerns. Big data changes the definition of knowledge. So as Latour phrased, change the instruments will change the society in which they are used. So the instruments are ethical in itself, instruments of measuring social science. So if we are not careful in designing them and defining them, then that also changes the society in which they are used. Big data is not objective and accurate. The claims are that it's always super accurate and objective, but it is not true. So it is always a representation of what people do on the platform. It's usually filtered, so when you download the data from a platform like Twitter, you get only a subset of the real big data set. And you don't know how it's filtered. The bigger the better. Still the same methodological issues are relevant. So it doesn't mean that because it's a lot of data that there's no bias issues, there's no other issues. The context is key. So one example of that is how they use the social graph. A lot of researchers use the social graph by taking data from social networks. But it's not actually the goal of the social graph to show frequency of interaction, but more the intensity of the interaction. So it might be that your spouse is further away on the social graph than your coworkers because the technology sees that you're more often with them. Accessible doesn't mean ethical. So just because data is accessible doesn't mean that it's an ethical thing to use. In Harvard, they had 1,700 Facebook students that they did research on. They anonymized this data, they published it, and then they found out that it was not anonymized enough. Which is an example of how open data, supposedly used in research, doesn't mean that it's ethical to do that. Then you have the data access divides. So mostly male computer science people working at tech companies can actually analyze the data, and researchers that are not computer science or are not in a technical company, they don't have access to that. So you create a huge divide between the data creators and the researchers that are down there and the data elite that have full access to the data. And this is a huge risk.